Your wife was taken away by the police, and you're the one who made the call, because she took your money and gave it to her lover. But the real culprit behind all of this is you. Not because you couldn't satisfy her in bed, but because of the decisions you made back then. You lived in a pretty decent neighborhood. A $270,000 salary made life feel almost too comfortable. But unchecked spending was a slow poison you didn't notice at first. You look around the room, piled high with pet supplies, and you don't even own a pet. Decades of savings were like a faucet that was never fully turned off, quietly leaking away in everyday life. The reckless spending pushed your wife past the thrill of normal shopping. Deep down, you always knew she was cheating. You just chose not to expose it. All to keep a broken family barely held together. Most people don't lose their future in one dramatic mistake. They leak it out in silence. One drink here, one delivery there. A shirt bought for a mood that disappeared the same night. A phone upgrade justified in 30 seconds and paid for over months. And the lie you were taught is that this is normal. The lie you may still be proud of is that it's harmless and manageable. It isn't, and that story has cost people more than bad luck ever did. Think back to being 14 or 15, you didn't have much, maybe some allowance money folded in a wallet. Nobody sat you down and told you that every unnecessary dollar had a second version, a future version, a shadow value. The amount was never just the amount. Now widen the frame, not 1 week, but 52. Not just one moment of teenage spending, because at 18, nothing feels urgent except the present. You become independent on paper. The market suddenly starts speaking to you like you are a full adult, with full permission to consume coffee runs, clothes, and streaming subscriptions. Later, when income is higher and life settles down. Later, when you know more and investing feels relevant. Still, because the punishment is delayed, the lesson never lands. There is no alarm on your phone that warns you. That impulse buy just cost your middle-aged self several times more than you think. No notification appears after a weekend of casual spending, telling you what that money would have looked like after years of uninterrupted growth. This is where many people become most dangerous to themselves. Because they confuse increased spending power with progress. They think affording the payment means the purchase is safe. They think the issue is whether the bank balance survives this week. $1,000 wasted at 21 can be a painful financial decision you never notice. Not because it feels huge that day, because it usually doesn't. It disappears into travel, status, a device, or a string of weekends. A version of yourself you were trying to perform. The pain comes later, when you realize that the money didn't merely leave. It left while it still had enormous time ahead of it. So if you always believed your problem was not earning enough, stop there. If you take pride in the idea that these were just minor purchases, and that everyone does it, stop there too. The common habit is not proof of safety, and maybe that makes you uncomfortable, which is good, it should. Because comfort is what kept the pattern alive. Not dramatic ruin, not instant collapse, something much colder than that. That is the bad news, but the better news comes when you see it clearly. But first, I want you to do something uncomfortable. Think of the age where you first had any money at all, and ask yourself one question. When did you start spending as if every dollar was temporary? It gets worse the moment your income starts covering the lie. That is the part nobody warns you about. When you were younger, wasting money felt small because the amounts were small. At 25, the numbers change. The behavior looks more respectable, but the damage becomes far more serious. Used furniture turns into brand new furniture. A working phone gets replaced because a newer one exists. And that is the trap. You waste more, but you feel it less, so you keep doing it, not once, not twice, but all year. By 25, many people waste more in a single year than they wasted in the previous 10 years combined. Read that again slowly, 1 year outweighing a decade. Not because life got more expensive by accident, but because comfort gave your spending a moral disguise. And then comes the part that hurts in a way ordinary spending advice never captures. You don't just see what you spent, you see what it could have become. At 35, looking back at a wasted $5,000 from your early 20s is not looking at $5,000. It's looking at tens of thousands of dollars that never got the chance to exist. A wasted $10,000 is no longer just a bad phase or a string of indulgent decisions. It starts to resemble a down payment that never materialized. So when someone says it wasn't that much, force the numbers back into the room. Wasn't that much compared to what? Compared to one paycheck or 1 month of salary? Sometimes. But compared to decades of growth? Compared to entering your 40s with real assets versus explanations? Compared to the emotional cost of realizing you worked for 15 years and still have little to show for it? Suddenly it wasn't small at all, it was just delayed. That is why this stage matters, not for shame, but for clarity. Because once the numbers are put beside the timeline, the illusion weakens fast. The waste at 25 was not casual, and the waste at 30 was not harmless. By 35, the evidence is already on the table, and most people can feel it before they can fully say it. The problem was never one big financial disaster. It was years of socially approved leakage. You need to see it leave one category and land in another. That visual matters because the brain loves to believe that restraint means loss. So show it the opposite. Show it a balance that rises because you didn't react. Show it proof that saying no is not subtraction. The dinner you skipped did not vanish. The unnecessary device you delayed did not become suffering. The money stayed alive, and that is the entire shift. And if you want one more layer, make the rule rigid for 30 days. No purchase over your threshold on the same day you first see it. None. Treat same-day discretionary spending like a locked door. You are not asking whether you deserve it, and you are not punishing yourself. You are testing how much of your spending is desire. Desire that can survive contact with time. Most of it cannot, and that is the point. Because by 35 or 40, the danger is no longer ignorance. You already know money can compound, and you understand that waste scales with income. The danger now is automatic behavior disguised as adulthood. Better furniture on payments, faster shipping because waiting feels offensive. A car upgrade framed as practicality. 5 subscriptions you barely touch because canceling requires 10 minutes you keep refusing to spend. None of this looks reckless in isolation. That is why it is so effective at dismantling your future quietly. So don't try to solve your whole financial life this week. Just build the interruption, one note, one threshold. One waiting period, one transfer destination. Repeat until the action becomes more familiar than the impulse. That is how you cut the old wiring. Not with inspiration, not with guilt. But with a process so plain it becomes difficult to escape. Try it with the next thing you were about to buy just to feel better for an hour. Put it on the list, and wait 72 hours. Move the money if the urge dies. Then come back and tell me what the first item was, because that answer usually reveals more than the price ever did. This is the part where most people expect a miracle, and that is exactly where you need to be careful. Not a fantasy, not a promise that one decision turns into instant wealth. What changes your life is much quieter than that. It looks like a charge that never hits the card. A checkout you close. An upgrade you skip. A Friday night impulse that dies in your hand, before it becomes another forgotten object in a drawer. That is the real pivot. Because if a conservative $5,000 a year disappeared from age 20 to 40, that is $100,000 gone in plain sight. And if those same dollars had been given time instead of friction, they could have become $200,000 to nearly $300,000. Not imaginary money, not lottery money. Just money that was allowed to stay alive long enough to grow. And yes, that realization stings because the old purchases are gone. The meal is gone, the subscription is gone, the clothes are gone, the electronics are outdated, and the tiny comforts evaporated. But the lost compounding did not evaporate. It became an invisible version of your life, one you can feel without ever being able to touch. Maybe it was a smaller mortgage or the emergency fund. That would have let you sleep through a layoff. Maybe it was the difference between checking your balance with a tight chest and opening your banking app without fear. That is why regret feels so physical here. It's not just about money. It's about the weight that money could have removed. But this is also where the story can stop being cruel. Because the market doesn't care about the version of you that used to leak cash. Compounding has no interest in your old habits, or your late start, your embarrassment, or the decade you think you ruined. It only responds to what happens next. From this moment forward, every dollar you do not waste is a dollar that still has a future. That is the only part that matters now. The dead money is dead, and the live money is still waiting for instructions. So do not leave this with a vow to become perfect. Perfection is how people fail by Tuesday. Leave with something smaller and more dangerous, a standing refusal to keep feeding what does not matter. Keep the practical rule brutally simple. When an unnecessary expense appears, pause long enough to ask what that money would become if it were left alone and invested instead. Not what this purchase costs today, what it costs your future self in options, in margin, in recovery time. If the answer makes your stomach tighten, that is useful. That is awareness doing its job. Then move the money before your mood changes. Make it leave your spending orbit and enter your investing system. While the clarity is still fresh, that is the promise here. Not that you will get rich quickly or erase every bad decision. Not that 10 years from now life will be flawless. The promise is more honest than that. You are not owed a perfect recovery, but you are still allowed a powerful one. And that starts the second you stop confusing consumption with relief, and start treating every unwasted dollar like retained force. If this hit something real for you, tell me the one expense you see differently now, not your whole story.